Well, good afternoon all. I'm going to set off around the garden to forage bits for a funeral wreath. It is the 5th of February and you might think there's very little in the garden. Well, let me tell you, there will be plenty, and I'm going to be showing you how to forage, why I'm foraging at this time of day, and how long I'm going to leave everything before I make the wreath, how long the wreath is going to live until it's used on the coffin, and all that kind of business. So come along, get a little vitamin D with me while we're at it. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do press the bell icon and we'll tell you when we've got more clips coming up. And if any of the tips and tricks I give you along the way are useful, you can always buy me a coffee, or better still, join my club. The links to everything are in the blurb to all my clips. Come on then, let's go. So making a funeral wreath or any kind of piece for an occasion like this in the middle of winter, actually I think is a great gift, because one can really use the whole cycle of life in the wreath. The reason I haven't cut early this morning is because we actually had -3 frost last night, and we've got another -3 frost forecast tonight and all the way through the rest of the week. It's the February full moon tonight. It is the 5th of February. So I'm cutting in the afternoon because everything's as defrosted as it's going to get in between those two cold patches. But the hardy, useful pieces that I'm going to work, despite the fact that they look terrible in the morning and you think, oh, am I really going to get anything? Actually, head out into the garden with some snips and see what you can find. You don't have to be making a wreath for a funeral. These skills can be used for all sorts of occasions. Anyway, come along, let's go cutting. For funerals, we always have rosemary for remembrance. But from this little patch outside the back door, I'm also going to have, because it's a wreath, so I can use some quite nice short stems. So I've got some Buxus sempivervens box. There I've got a row of them going up to the gate. Then, as you can see on the right, there's a small tree, and that is a bay tree. Always have bay. Love the scent. Those of you who watch my clips often will recognise this lovely brachioglottis. And then here, looking rather like it needs a feed, but very beautifully scented here, those flowers are gorgeously scented. This is sarcococca, or Christmas box, or whatever you want to call it, but it has the most delicious scent from those little tiny white flowers you can see. So I have a little bit of that. Nearly all the buried ivy has been used up through Christmas and various big projects that I've done, but there's a little bit left, just enough for this project. And like I did last week for my kokedama piece, I'm going to dig up snowdrops to put into this piece of work. And at this time of year, on a sunny afternoon, if you're going out looking for material to cut, you might find other people enjoying the sunshine. And the good old perennial grasses are still cutting beautifully. So it's the next day and I've got plenty of material. I've got lots of twiggery pokery, some for the base and some to be used in the arrangement of the wreath. Moss, obviously, more dry bits, and a whole bucket full of greenery, all sorts of different kinds of bits and pieces. I've dug up a bunch of a clump of snowdrops, and here we go. Now I'm going to start off making a basic circle, and I'm going to use this poplar. At this time of year, the buds of the poplar are beginning to get sticky, and if you run your hands along them, even squeeze them, you will see there, can you see just a tiny little bead of juicy, sticky, and it is the glue. Look, it's yellow. You see the colour? It is the glue which the bees use to stick their hives together. And as a result, when the poplar comes out, it smells like honey. I love this smell more than anything. So if I make a base for the willow, not for the willow, if I make a base for the wreath out of this, and if it's warm, then you will smell this lovely scent, and it's really, really delicious. It's important. I went to a funeral last week, and one forgets that there isn't very much room on the top of a coffin, and so don't make anything too enormous. The point of a wreath like this is that it's not size and showiness that matters. It's delicacy and something to look at. So I'm going to quickly make the base for you. I do have a living wreath with plants in workshop coming up in April around Easter time, probably the end of March. Around Easter time, when I go through this, it takes an hour, so you really get step by step, but I'm not going to spend an hour doing this on here, but I will quickly show you how I do it and what it looks like when it's finished. So not very long later, I have a nice base. I have to say, I love them when they're twiggy like this, and I would keep them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut. I've got all the ends are all on the same side, so I'm going to cut them off because otherwise it doesn't sit flat. And obviously you want something to be fairly solid for a funeral, but also as tidy. Call me a weirdo, but I like it to be sort of tidy and solid and have a certain amount of weight. So I've used more twigs than I strictly need to make this base, but I like everything to feel fairly solid. And certain, have a bit of weight. Now on with the moss, which I picked up from the garden yesterday and I just peeled it up from the paths, and I'm going to moss it, tie it on the moss, and I'll show you afterwards. And as I go, I'm tucking in snowdrops, which I've just dug out of the ground. It's a simple, sorry, I'm hiding. It's a simple and kind of thoughtful process. Just in they go, slowly, slowly. Now, personally, I could pretty much stop at this stage. A cushion of moss with snowdrops is lovely. And actually, if you put that in a graveyard, chances are they'll slowly grow into the ground and will be there forever. But I'm going to make a proper wreath. So I'm not going to stop at a cushion of moss with snowdrops. And actually the snowdrops are all quite weird angles. So I'm now going to tie on with my raffia, and then I'm going to start adding all that foliage that I've cut. And I just go round and round. It's really nice, a sort of slow, thoughtful process. I love doing a living wreath. So now I'm just going to take all the lovely foliage I've cut, more twiggery pokery, and add it to the finished product. It looks more wreathy now that I've bound the moss in. You can see the hole in the middle. So now I'm just going to work around one foliage at a time. This is Griselinia, lovely green. And I'm going to remember not to make it too big. I don't want it overwhelming. I want it small but beautiful. And the nice thing about the Griselinia is it's lovely fresh green, and it's the slight contrast with the glow of the snowdrops, which have a sort of silvery leaf. So I'm going to go foliage by foliage all the way around and just tucking everything in. The moss works just like floral foam used to. Very easy. and off we go. And when I've sort of finished like this, I go round it to make sure that nothing is going to fall out. So there, it's pretty much finished. Lovely mix of foliage. There's Brachydglottis, Euonymus japonica, Gristolinia, box, obviously the snowdrops. This little flowery person here is Viburnum Eve Price. We've got ivy tucked in, and somewhere, if I can find it, yes, there's a bit of Christmas box, and here is bay. So all sorts of bits and pieces, but what's missing? It's a funeral wreath. There must be something we haven't got yet. And of course, what's missing is rosemary for remembrance. And so I'm just going to tuck it in last. I tend to put it in last so it doesn't get lost with all the other foliage and things, because it's so important for a funeral. And I'm just going to tuck it in so it sticks up. I'll show you when I'm finished. And you can see if it's being carried at head height, you can see how those lovely snowdrops are all just popping out and will be seen. So important, I think, that funeral work, it really is something that people can look at and kind of get lost in, almost meditate upon during the service. Anyway, there she is. All done, ready for collection. And there we have a very lovely, I think, wreath to go on a coffin. I love the way that the snowdrops are sort of growing through the undergrowth, as they do in real life. I mean, it's a bit of a squashed miniature garden, but it is a miniature garden nonetheless. So she's kind of done, and I know I cut bits of dried material, but I'm not convinced, so I'm not going to use them. You don't always have to use everything just because you've got it. Sometimes you've just got to say, that's enough. Enough.